I'm Beth Dickstein, co-founder of The Original Americas. Today's speaker is a true creative, having led creative and marketing teams for firms from Nike to Vitra, and today Herman Miller. Ben Watson is a gift to all you students. Discussing the belief as an organization in Herman Miller's standards of quality, creativity, and the balance of form and function, Ben will give you what is so needed beyond the school curriculum. It is truly my extreme honor to introduce you to Ben Watson.
Beth, thank you so much for the kind words, and welcome everyone. And thanks for joining us today for a conversation about what we believe to be true about design at Herman Miller. And I think the slide that you see on the show, on our first slide, perhaps includes a word that's unusual and unknown to some of us. But the word tenet, when we look that up in the dictionary, tells us that it's a belief that a group or a community holds in common. So the words on this slide simply what we at Herman Miller believe to be true about design and what holds us together. So I have an opportunity to come to you today from our headquarters here in Zeeland, Michigan. I'm right at our front door, so apologies if I have a chance to say, wave hello to colleagues who are walking by as they come in and out. We're also excited to be returning to our offices again and seeing one another after what's been a long, hard year. But it's fun to be able to reach out and speak to everybody today through this forum. I've just got a few short slides, and in fact, I'm sharing with you the exact same slides that I share with my colleagues internally. And so one of my jobs at Herman Miller is to help everyone at the organization, and today we're more than 8,000 folks, be fantastic practitioners and stewards of design. That's different today than it was, quote, back in the early days of Herman Miller, where design was a close community. So at the center of this image, you see our founder, Mr. Dupree, surrounded by a very small group of now very well-known designers from the mid-century, whether that's Ray and Charles Eames and George Nelson, Nelson next to Alexander Girard. A small community of designers were fueling both the products and the ideas that were Herman Miller. But today, Herman Miller is a far larger organization, and we're working in many more disciplines and indeed working all around the world. Today, we're working, in fact, with several hundred designers. A handful of them are shown here in images of folks who are our current partners, but they're located everywhere from Tokyo to London, from Stuttgart to San Francisco. And making every one of these relationships, and indeed every one of our designs and design solutions, not only right for solving the problem, but right for Herman Miller, is central to what we think our design tenets help us do. So the tenets came to be almost 10 years ago, when I asked a group of design leaders at the company to join me to come together to create, in essence, a set of guidelines for practicing design. I could see the eyeballs virtually roll when I sent the invitation for the meeting, but in fact, we had an awesome couple of days and created a set of beliefs, and in fact, rephrasing more than new beliefs of things that have been written and have been practiced at Herman Miller for nearly our 115 years. So we didn't set out to write 10, but indeed that's how many we landed with. And I'm going to walk through them with you today. And where we start is really where we start every project. Number one is that we design for people. This notion of being that design is a human-centered practice is not unique to Herman Miller, but it is absolutely always the starting place of how we begin every project. I'm going to illustrate this principle with not first an image of a design, but an image of a research paper. So Robert Probst created this small little booklet to summarize his research that began in the 1960s when he was looking at how the world of work was changing. And by paying attention and deeply researching people, he actually ultimately put together a maybe 50-page book on what he had learned about people and how they were interacting with one another and with space and with technology. It was actually the research about people that led Probst then to the Action Office program, which was designed and launched in the late 60s and 70s, which truly revolutionized thinking about what workplaces could be. Although this fantastic image from our archives certainly shows its date, what is still super powerful is what's always universal to humans: our need to be able to connect with one another, our need to be able to have private spaces, the ability to have different postures while we're at work, whether that's lounging, standing, or sitting at a desk. So being human-centered, starting with people, is always the start of every project. So number two is we're always purposeful. Our designs very intentionally solve a problem. We're starting with people, we're intent on solving a problem that can help people live better lives. Here is an image of our Compass program, which we use to help support patient rooms in healthcare facilities. So here, it's a fantastic example because the problem set was really, really complicated. There's so many problems in that small little space where care is delivered to a patient. On the macro scale, hospital construction usually takes about 7 years from its first genesis of the need to actually opening up the front door. Over that span, so many things will have changed, from patient care protocols and certainly staff and decision makers. But so many things are intersecting in a patient room: the actual needs of the patient, their visiting family, their caregivers themselves who are arriving to provide care. So it's understanding each of these individual problems and realizing that they're all part of a whole leads us to a solution. So it's both the extraordinary cleanability of surfaces in a program like Compass, the far right of an image that allows a cart to be quickly wheeled away when it's full of dirty or soiled linens. But even the details, like here, a small curve to the outlet of the sink, a sink that's used by caregivers when they arrive to rooms to wash their hands before working with a patient, is even slightly curved to go directly towards the drain. That significantly reduces overspray and reduces the spread of infection, which is, number one, the most important need in a patient room. So in fact, you're solving problems at the macro scale and the micro scale all at the same time. On to number three. Not only do we solve a problem, everything in the design has to relate to the problem. One of my favorite quotes around this idea comes from our design partners at Studio 7.5. That's the design firm located in Berlin, Germany, that we've been working with for over 20 years, primarily in the realm of designing high performance seating. This is an image of their Settee chair, which we worked on together for actually many, many years. But when we created Settee, it was their ask to us, and our agreement together on the problem to solve is, could we deliver extraordinary comfort to a sitter without requiring them to adjust the chair specifically for them? What if a chair will be shared by many, whether it's in a meeting or conference room, or by different users who come and go. 7.5 peeled away not only all the different constraints of the chair to tend to just that one specific problem. And in fact, if you look at the chair on the far left, you'll see the result, what we call a kinematic beam. It's actually a recreation of a molding. You can see highly informed by the natural world and nautilus shells that bends uniquely to the weight that a sitter provides when they sit down. So that beam was a solution that allowed us to reduce the weight of a chair almost by half, to reduce its total number of parts to just 18, and to create a product that delivered that extraordinary comfort. 7.5's quote, where I started, was they didn't want to use a molecule more than necessary than we had to solve the specific problem. But they didn't stop there. We think of design as much about how we build or make a product as it is how the product performs for its ultimate user. Internally, we call this the Herman Miller performance system. It's how do we, in the design of our objects, actually consider the design of the entire footprint and supply chain of the product as well? Do we make it extremely easy for our colleagues working on the shop floor to assemble the chair that's built one at a time specifically for a customer? Do we make it extremely easy to make that capacity to flux when demand changes? And do we make the reduction of human struggle everywhere along the stream paramount? So we're designing not just the object, but at the same time, we're designing the process. So everything has to relate to the problem, and we have to embrace that that in every project, the problem can be very complex. Number 4, we simply don't copy. Maybe it follows if we go back up to 1, 2, and 3, what we really want to do is to focus on people and to focus on human problems. When we begin addressing a particular problem, we don't start with a set of images or a room full of products from competitors near and far. We start with the problem. We're confident if we pay attention to the human need, we'll uncover unique and we believe and hope compelling and differentiated solutions that are going to be powerful for our customers and ultimately then powerful for our commercial success. Perhaps the very best example I could think of to illustrate this is our Aeron chair, now celebrating more than 25 years, and in fact, it's the most sold chair ever. And the Aeron competes in a workplace, particularly serving individuals at work. It looks like no other work chair before it. Many have perhaps been inspired by or have been copying Aeron ever since. But up to that point, every chair was fully upholstered, full of foam on its seat and its back. Paying attention to the problem of extended sitting times and the need to change postures informed Aeron's kinematic motion, and most importantly, perhaps, its materials. The advance of a whole new helical suspension material that allows a sitter to be supported while still maintaining a very breathable experience, really reducing heat buildup that happens during extended periods of work and sitting. So by tending to the human problem, rather than what things already look like in the marketplace, we were able to create a design that truly didn't copy, although perhaps inspires others. All right, on to number 5. Quality is central to what we do, and we believe that the quality of our work has to be immediately evident to the users of our products. This is true for absolutely everything that we make. And quality is, of course, the materials that we select, but it's also the human ways that those are put together. We often think of what we create as being industrial craft. It both takes industrial processes, but it takes human skill and craft to put together things in a powerful way. This is certainly a lesson that we were taught by our partners, Charles and Ray Eames, and perhaps is best brought to life in the Eames lounge chair, what we affectionately refer to as Model 670 and 671, the lounge chair and ottoman, which have been in continuous production since they were first launched in the 1950s. The quality that we deliver in a lounge chair is actually not just for the sitter of today, and is it evident in the veneers that are hand selected, the leathers and how they're cut, indeed the almost 100 hours that are used to assemble a lounge chair before it steps into a box to head to its new home. But the fact that it perhaps is supported by the notion that we get letters, I think, almost every week from customers telling us about the next generation of their lounge chair, sometimes serving 5 generations of a single family as it gets passed down from generation to generation. So creating quality goods not only tells us that we create goods that are durable, but bring delight all the way through that very, very long life. Number 6, at Herman Miller, we believe we have a responsibility to the environment. Our responsibility to our customers and to our communities means that we have to respect the physical environments in which we operate, and that means everywhere along our supply chain. That's not just in the products that we make, but the places that we occupy. That's why I chose, as an example of this point, our greenhouse, which is one of our manufacturing facilities here in Michigan. The greenhouse holds hundreds of our employees, and it's where we assemble every one of our seeding products that's delivered all across the country. So the greenhouse was built in the 1980s in partnership with architect Bill McDonough. And extraordinarily, when we set out to create the greenhouse for this purpose, I think it exemplifies many of our beliefs about being sustainable members of our community. One, we occupy only a small percentage of the acreage that the site sits on. The bulk of it is left over in a natural state, home to wildflowers and bees. Number 2, perhaps most importantly, we work diligently with Mr. McDonough to develop a new standard of construction in energy use, wastewater management, even natural light. That work together ultimately created was the founding of the LEED building standards. And so the greenhouse has been named the Pioneer Building by the LEED Building Institute for actually creating those standards that led to worldwide forward motion in sustainable manufacturing and construction. So for us, we were solving not just our commitment for sustainability, but participating with the larger community about how we could do better for the world as a whole. Today, the greenhouse lives on. It's a welcome center for all of our visitors, as well as serving as construction or manufacturing center for all of our seating. And it's these ideas of continual reuse and invention that we think are so important and why it's so exciting every day that I have a chance to walk into the greenhouse. Moving on to number 7. Maybe one of my favorite themes here to talk about is this notion of beautiful and useful. And the combination and tension and sometimes even friction between these two ideas is really, really important and central to who we are at Herman Miller. Asking the question, do people actually want to own what we make, is very, very important and central to solving our problems. We believe we have to do more than simply solve the problem. We have to solve it in a delightful and desirable way. These principles were really central to us when we partnered with Yves Behar to work together to create what became the Sail Chair. The problem brief that we addressed with Yves was, again, complex, but we hope clear. Could we deliver extraordinary comfort for a long duration of time seated at a workplace, but do that in a way that made it extremely attainable and affordable and accessible to many? How could we deliver the kinematic support, the motions that were necessary, the ease of adjustments and use, but also maintain our commitments to sustainable materials, but do all of those things at a price point that was going to be almost 30% less than comparable products. We knew we could only succeed if we could do all of those things and make a product that was as beautiful as it was useful. Yves' inspiration of being informed by a suspension bridge, and maybe it's not a surprise coming from his home in San Francisco, gave birth to this beautiful form of a stretched backrest that's supported by uprights and stretches to the sides to embrace the sitter. To achieve that form, it took literally hundreds of thousands of engineering hours to determine just the durometer of all of the moldings and the dimension of each of those openings in the back to give the right support in the right places. But we believe it was both following the inspiration for what could be a beautiful form and turning that into a powerful use for the customer of delivering fantastic comfort at a fantastic price. But in the end, our customers ultimately decide. They decide if the products are working for them and if they find them beautiful and desirable. And for me, what's most exciting, and quick image from that I captured on my iPhone when visiting some friends at their office in New York City, is seeing our products alive in the world. Seeing them being used and supporting people, in this case, at work. And it's this combination of beauty and use that maybe is most central to making things successful, because we're making them desirable. Okay, we're moving in towards the close, just a couple more to go, but we're on number 8. This is maybe the hardest to define, but for those of us who work inside Herman Miller, it's really, really important. We use the word spirited to help us ask the question, does it say Herman Miller? Does it speak with passion and compassion? Does it speak with humanity? And with humanity, that means likely a little bit of humor. Perhaps designs from Alexander Girard from the 60s and 70s that create so much optimism are a great example. But I think equally and perhaps more powerful are the simple set of 20 picnic posters created by Steve Frickholm, our longtime art director. When Steve joined the company after being a Peace Corps volunteer following his design education at Cranbrook, well, one of the, quote, quick projects he was asked to take on was to design a poster to announce the company's annual picnic. This was 1970. No one knew at that time that Steve's posters would run on for 20 solid years, and that ultimately that collection would end up in the permanent collection at museums like MoMA in New York, the V&A in London, or in collections of design enthusiasts all around the world. What I think makes Steve's posters so powerful is not just their graphic sensibility, their overscale images, their fun play with food, and our nostalgic memories of what a picnic can be. But in fact, it's their optimism, it's their colors, it's the joy that they bring, the smile that they bring to a face. There are fantastic examples of that Herman Miller spirit coming to life in something as simple as an intercompany announcement. On to number 9. If we do all those things, is that enough? Can we go further than our customer actually expected? Can we actually surprise our customers by giving them something they didn't even expect or couldn't even imagine? We endeavor to do that, of course, in all of our products, but we're also delivering experiences. The example I chose here is our customer center here at our headquarters in Michigan, which is inside the old lodge called Marigold. This is a building that was built in 1913, sits on the lake, and was originally built as a summer home for an industrialist. He welcomed his guests there for a few relaxing weeks in the summer. Today, Marigold hosts over 100 customers a week, and it's where we invite our customers to come see how we create workplaces for ourselves, how we manufacture, and how we're thinking today, and how we're planning for the future. So the experiences that we're delivering at Marigold are central to communicating to our customers who we are and how we think about our place in the world. A few images of the interior of Marigold unfortunately can't create the actual or recreate the experiences that come to life there, but perhaps they give you a sense of why so often in the guest book at the lodge, customers write, this experience went above and beyond. It was so much more than I ever imagined. I was so delighted to spend my days with the team here at Herman Miller. Was it the vintage Gilbert Rhodey table from Herman Miller in the library, or the modern take on Ward Bennett's chair in the background? It wasn't any one item. It was how we delivered an experience that was designed thoughtfully around the customer and intended to, yes, give them a fantastic understanding of who we are, but to delight them in a way that they remember their experience and remembered us. So this idea of surprise and delight reminds us that what we do is not just a physical interaction with a given product, but it's actually connecting with people and hopefully delivering to them a surprising solution, yes, but a surprising experience every day. So we've hit 9, so that means we have 1 left. And our 10th tenet is the idea of inevitability. How do you know if a design solution is inevitable? If nothing more could be added and absolutely nothing could be taken away, that the solution just simply feels right. There's an ineffable quality to the solution that says, now's the time to put down the proverbial pencil because the very best possible result has been achieved. It's perhaps daunting to use this example as the one for helping us understand and describe what it means for us to endeavor to achieve inevitable with all of our designs. But the plywood chair designed by Ray and Charles Eames now almost 75 years ago was maybe for many good reasons, named the design of the century by Time magazine, beating out even the steam locomotive? Was it the reinvention of new processes, molding plywood that had never been done before? Was it the reduction of the form to just the simplest number of materials and elements that, despite their simplicity, gave extraordinary comfort to the sitter? Not only just static comfort, but motion as well. Is it somehow that the shape of the form suggests comfort and humanity, and yet at the same time we understand that those pieces were crafted industrially? It's all of those things, and none of us looking at that image today could imagine it being anything other than what it is. It's a lofty ambition that we give ourselves every time we step out to tackle a new problem, but it's fantastic to have this kind of design as a touchstone as we think about what's next. So for us, 10 tenets aren't in any particular order, and there's no perfect recipe for how they come into play anywhere along the project's course. But we use these 10 tenets to remind us about how we go about our work. And back to where we started, we do our work at Herman Miller together. We're 8,000 people, yes, but design doesn't belong to just one team or one organization, or just to external partners or an internal group. It's in fact everybody's job. Design is central to our mission, the reason why we exist on the planet. I think central to the reason why we've been successful for 115 years, and will be, I'm certain, central to our successes that I hope will still be to come on the road ahead. I've been delighted to share with you our 10 tenets. I hope there were moments that you could grab from that to gain some inspiration. And Beth and I would be delighted to help out with any questions, whether they arise directly from the tenets or that are directed to us here at Herman Miller more in general.
Thank you so much, Ben. I've always loved Herman Miller. Now I love it even more. I was very fortunate to go to Marigold one time.
Oh, fantastic.
Memorable. For our first question, have the interpretations of the tenets evolved over the years in responses to changes in the industry or cultural changes?
Indeed, they have. So that I mentioned early that we first penned these tenets or these 10 ideas 10 years ago, plus minus. But we leaned heavily on writings from folks who had come before us, maybe names that are familiar like Ralph Kaplan or Clark Malcolm, and even the Duprees who had written about our design principles at Herman Miller. And certainly George Nelson was fantastic in his early writing as well. But in those 10 years, we've used different examples. In fact, there are always many examples that we could cite to help illustrate any one of them, and recrafted the story. We do, what hasn't changed are the 10 key ideas. So over these 10 years, our goal was to create something that could be a toolkit that could be used by everyone on our team. And we still think that these 10 ideas are standing the test of time.
We should all have 10 tenets, actually. Next question is, how do you see your office product offering evolving in the changing future of office environments post-pandemic?
That's a fantastic question, and one that, of course, is occupying a ton of our energy, not just for the past year, but I think will be in the years ahead. And I think it's a very exciting time, because if we remember Mr. Probst's booklet, its title was A Facility Based on Change. Is there a moment of more profound change than the one that we're living through now? Perhaps not. And so what workplaces have to support as work becomes distributed among many more places, and work is less assigned, and more serve or self-serve, that creates a completely different set of settings, as well as some traditional settings that will morph. Um, we've been pushing forward some new ideas, like a product range that we call OE1, that we designed with our partners industrial facility from London, that came to market just in the last month or two. And I think more ideas and new products will be coming as workplaces need to blend to this new reality, that they'll need to move quickly from assigned to unassigned work, to change really quickly in scope and scale, and to be changed by individuals based on need rather than by facilities managers or architects necessarily. So the scale of change is really giving us an impetus for a lot of new product ideas.
And I'd like to add a little addendum to that question is, what about generations? There's so many generations that are now in the workforce in different ways. How do you think that's going to change what you're designing?
It already has been, whether that's the desires of some to, whether we can imagine, well, yes, some generations want to work in a lounge posture. Well, how do we deliver power and data to somebody who wants to work in a lounge posture for an extended period? What if that sofa wants to stay not just on one part of the floor, but quickly get pulled somewhere else? Can power serve somebody there too? So that's just a quick example that's or anecdote to describe the kinds of things that say not everybody wants to work in the same way. I think that's what's exciting about this post-pandemic moment, that more organizations are embracing that. And instead of cookie cutter solutions from Dilbertville, more varied and purposeful, and I hope delightful workplaces will be the result.
Another question from our students: have there been times when it was challenging to hold to a tenant, or times when tenants are in conflict with each other?
To the first part of the question, yes, it's extreme, and perhaps the two parts of the question are very much related, because it can feel often that tenants are in conflict with one another. What if using a more sustainable material creates something that isn't tested, proven, or known? How do we balance the desire to create something truly beautiful if it's slightly less useful? What's the right balance between any of that? Any particular belief, in fact, is the magic in finding a great design. And I think that the Eames plywood chair we used at the close is a fantastic example of if it navigated many or all of those tenets extraordinarily well, which is why it's such a fantastic exemplar. But they're often in conflict with one another, and trying to find ways where you can find both and solutions, where a design can actually deliver both things or multiple things at once, is really, really hard. And it's also, when you do find ways to do that, it's also most rewarding, and usually most rewarded by the commercial market too.
What are some ways that Herman Miller helps their employees and teams across the country or the world to keep the tenants in mind and in practice?
I think that's also a fantastic question. And first and foremost, the work is never done. So communicating what we believe to be true about design is not a one and done project, but something that we always have to remind ourselves about every day. Some of the things we do to make that possible are, for example, 10 simple videos that we created to try to bring each of these ideas to life are available to all employees on our intranet site. Simple bookmark cards that remind folks of the tenets are given to new employees in their arrival kit when they come to the company. And for design leaders across the company, it's important to have the tools they need, like the slides we looked at today, to share these ideas and to discuss them, not just with design teams, but with all teams, both in general and during a project. So it's creating tools, yes, but I think most importantly, always creating space for the conversation to celebrate that design is central to what we do with the company.
Can you discuss a few new products which have seen a lot of commercial success?
With pleasure. One product that comes to mind is our COSM chair. So COSM is a chair that was launched, I guess, just more than a year ago now, before the pandemic, again with our design partners at 7.5. In fact, the idea of COSM was born when we closed the design work on the Satu chair, which we discussed earlier. But it took almost 8 years of thinking, tinkering, development, design, and redesign to take that idea of immediate comfort and to bring it to a whole new level of form and extraordinary comfort. I can say that I chose the COSM for my own home office to use over the last year, not because it's both beautiful and useful. What was interesting along the process is that we believed in the idea, but we didn't actually believe that the marketplace had more than a small appetite for a chair that was going to be automatically adjusting versus highly adjustable, like the Aeron, Embody, and other chairs that are core to our offer. In fact, the commercial success of COSM has been far beyond our expectations. The delight that it delivers to a customer, whether they're buying one for their home office or buying hundreds for their office, is immediate the moment that anyone sits down. And so it's that sense of accommodation that has ignited commercial success. I think more immediately, I'd use our OE1 product line, which we're selling one at a time, tables and storage units to customers who are buying them for their home, and in large scale to customers who are creating much more agile workplaces than they did in the past. When I checked in with the team earlier this week, we're already, even though that product is in its first year, we're at 185% of our projections of revenue, meaning many more customers than we imagined are gravitating to that kind of agile solution.
Here's a question. What does the future look like for Herman Miller? Can you ever see adding a new tenant?
I think it's really important to always have a flexible and open mind. That's different than saying, do we believe different things to be true? So I think we look at the tenets as a set of principles or beliefs which serve us well. That doesn't mean that they have to be cast in stone. Constantly challenging ourselves to say, is this the very best we can do? Should include looking at the tenets and saying, are they doing the very best and solving for who we are right now? So on several occasions, we've gathered a round table to ask ourselves that question. And so far, we've returned to those 10 ideas saying they're still serving us well. But I think it's important to always try to keep an open mind to say things could change that are not foreseen right now. And that change isn't bad, embracing change is a good thing. So I think it's important to always ask, is this a useful tool or still true? Or is it time for a change? And no one knows until one examines change carefully.
Yeah, and things do change, as we know.
Yeah.
Excuse me. How do you expect the shift back to the office to change in terms of office well-being?
I think what's exciting about that question, Beth, is that well-being and well-being, both as physical, emotional, spiritual health, is a much higher priority for every individual and every organization than ever before. And so supporting supporting humans as we during the time of the pandemic meant that many organizations changed what their priorities were. Perhaps that was organizations saying, hey, we'll help fund providing you ergonomic tools and comfort for your home office so that you're not working on an uncomfortable wooden chair for 10 hours a day. Those same kinds of ideas are stronger than ever as organizations are saying, what about the places where our employees gather? I can't think of a single customer engagement we've had in the last months where their employee wellness and well-being wasn't the highest level of priority. And I think that wasn't, to say it wasn't always the case in the past. I think what is consistent is it's higher in everyone's priority than it was before. I think that's a trend that's not going to go away.
I totally agree. How did you work with designers during the pandemic?
In many ways, things didn't change. We exchanged ideas. We exchanged drawings and notes and comments, all just like the lives we all lived in the last year. We did that via Zoom and Teams calls. It's not the same as gathering around a prototype together where your finger, your eye, and your knee can all actually trace the line on a prototype. And my big rear end can sit down in a chair and my colleague's small rear end can sit down right after, and we can both talk about whether that was, quote, comfortable or not. So I think some things in evaluating physical products are possible to do only in a physical connection. So I think we'd have to be honest to say some parts of our work necessarily slowed down as we had to do things like ship prototypes to multiple locations when our design partners were located in different cities or countries, or to move things back and forth that took more time. On the other hand, many of those things are things that we're used to doing because we have design partners scattered all around the world. So maybe in some ways we were well prepared for working with remote partners, but I think the reality is looking back, we know that it became harder when it was never possible to gather around physical things together. I'm really looking forward to having more of that now in the months ahead.
What skills do you think students and emerging designers should be working on developing now to do well in the design industry?
I think a skill that is frequently overlooked in design education is communication and personal communication skills that allow one to convey a concept, an idea, and a detail. And it's these ideas that every design was born from an idea, and understanding that idea and how a physical solution embodies that idea and delivers on its promise requires a story. So a successful designer in practice is not just great at designing solutions, they're great at communicating why a solution came to be and why it's going to solve for their customer and deliver on that promise. So I think those skills of communicating visually, yes, but also verbally are really, really important. And so I'd encourage students to ask themselves, what challenges are they giving themselves to improve communication skills? And it can be as simple as not shying away from presentations at crits in class, or doing them additionally with friends or peers. But realizing that communicating your idea is just as important as creating the idea, I think is something I'd encourage every design student to take to heart.
And to follow that up, what tools and mediums do the designers use at Herman Miller to help with that kind of communication?
The easiest answer, Beth, would be every tool at their disposal. So use the right tools. There's not not one tool set, and a PowerPoint deck is not my favorite toolkit, but it happened to work for this particular format to communicate to students who are coming in from everywhere today. But I think it's understanding many different kinds of tools, and more importantly than the tools that we're comfortable using with, think of the audience that we're talking to. So if you're making a presentation to the CEO of a company about an idea, do they really want to be looking at a CAD file that's hard to read when they're not used to working with that kind of visual language? Would a rendering do a better job than a axonometric drawing? When I'm talking to an engineering team, perhaps I should wear a different hat and put on get out a different tool set to think about the best ways to communicate with that audience. So a designer has a fantastic hub role to play in the creation of new things, and that requires them to engage with many different kinds of partners. It requires them to be really supple in their tool set to build different kinds of communications for different kinds of listeners.
And this is about you. Can you tell us more about your education and career path?
I can. I was fortunate enough to study design at university, and I went to school not thinking I would pursue a career in design, but thinking that in fact, I think I entered university thinking I wanted either a career in political science or fashion design. And I like to joke about that. I wrote that in my college application essay. And I like to joke that, in fact, what I do today is a combination of both of those things, because it's, designing solutions, but also communicating those ideas and navigating those priorities through an organization or out into the world. So my degree from Harvard was in visual and environmental studies, a very, very small program that's based in a Corbusier building in Cambridge, that very intentionally includes studio design as well as design theory from all kinds of different practices. So I studied drawing and photography and filmmaking, as well as graphics and products and sculpture. And I think what was so exciting for me coming out of education was realizing that design didn't need to be just one thing, and I was somehow interested in all of them. I took that and a thesis project that was actually centered on Eames design really awakened my fascination for furniture. And so I left university and went straight to Knoll, where I worked on product and marketing teams for the first years of my career. And after Knoll, I joined Vitra, the Swiss company, first in their US offices, and then moved to Switzerland to lead their marketing teams worldwide. I moved to Nike in the early 2000s, where I joined their team to serve as the global creative director for their apparel business. So back to maybe that some of those early wishes from university, which was fantastic to work on a global scale, to work thinking about customers every day, and to work with a large design team. We were over 400 people all around the world. And finally, moving back to New York, and I divide my time today between New York and Herman Miller's home in Michigan. Was working with for a period with the Italian furniture company Moroso, and now with Herman Miller in the role that I currently serve for more than the last decade.
Impressive.
Thank you. Most importantly, working with people who care about design, where I can engage with colleagues who are equally passionate about design themes, big and small.
So here's our final question for you before we wrap up. What are the last words of advice might you have for students?
Beth, that's a fantastic question. And I think as a link to our last thread, it's follow your passion. Work on projects that you really care about. Work with people that inspire you, that you want to spend your time with. Thinking that there's some magical goal at the end of a rainbow or end of a tunnel that you'll arrive, and when you arrive there, then you'll be happy, I think is maybe not the most successful model. But do the things right now that you're most excited in exploring and most passionate about learning. It doesn't mean that the work will always be easy, but it means that it won't feel like work because you're doing it with pleasure. I think when we do things we care about and are passionate about, we end up doing our best work, which allows us to keep uncovering new chapters and new steps forward in a career.
Thank you so much, Ben. I'm sure the students got a lot out of this session. I know I did. So thank you.
Thank you, Beth.
Attendees, thank you so much for joining us. And if you'd like to learn more about Be Original Americas, please visit www.beoriginalamerica's.com or follow us at Be Original USA on Instagram. To learn more about Herman Miller, please visit www.hermanmiller.com or follow them at Herman Miller Ltd on Instagram. Thank you very, very much. Bye-bye.